What is up, theology nerds? This is Trip, and you're listening to the Homebrewed Christianity Podcast. I hope you're having yourself a zesty day. How's your day, Nathan?
Oh, so zesty.
Oh, that's what I like to hear.
I'm having a zesty drink.
Well, I mean, a LaCroix with the grapefruit LaCroix. That is a premium fruit essenced carbonated water.
Hashtag zesty.
Oh, yeah. I have a small addiction to LaCroix.
No, it's not small.
No, if you crush the cans in your garage, then you never notice just how many you get. So, anyway, I know today we're going to talk to Miroslav Volf, and Miroslav Volf is kind of like one of the coolest, most awesome theologians around. He wrote Exclusion and Embrace, which is a book that was just made a huge impact on me, tons of other people, and today we're talking about a trilogy of books around faith, religion, culture, and the public square. He wrote a book called Public Faith. Then he wrote a book called Flourishing. Then he wrote a book called Public Faith in Action. And those three together really reflect around religion, politics, culture, and such. And surprisingly, talking to Miroslav Volf this week, right at the end of the first week of the Trump administration, we had things to talk about.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I know.
I always wonder, if you guys gonna have anything to talk about?
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
And it was a super, super awesome conversation. And I hope you enjoy it. And I hope you enjoy it so much you share it with your friends. You say to your friends, you should really listen to Homebrewed Christianity. And you give them this episode because you're like, it's not an hour and a half. Because the first time, you don't want to give someone 90 minutes for the first time unless they're their super special nerdy friend. But then to have a super special nerdy friend,
you reel them in.
You reel them in with this type of conversation. The other reason I think you're gonna love this episode is some theologians write large books and do 3-hour seminars professionally. Then there are others like Miroslav Volf who've had a kind of a public platform long enough. He is just down to answer questions in kind of clear, concise ways, and we cover a whole lot of material and ground in a shorter amount of time, and the tweetable nuggets are just flying all over the place.
Oh, you should really follow him on Twitter too.
Oh yeah, definitely. And the other thing that I wanted to say, as we're jumping in this episode, is look, Nathan over here. Nathan, he is going to try to be talking some of you who are ministers into joining a little experiment we're going to have with the Homebrewed community. We're looking for people who are leaders in a church, who could be ministers or just ready to organize for churches to host some art walks. And say a little bit about it, and then they can go to the website and find more information. But, Nathan does lots of work for the podcast, hours and hours unseen. And I'm just saying, there's probably like 10 ministers at least that are listening that want to give an opportunity for families and people with disabilities in their congregation to be the ones that center our reflection. And Nathan will help you out. So say something about that.
Yeah. You kind of alluded to a little bit about what it is. It's for people with disabilities and their families, caregivers, friends, etc. It's a way to try to make those people who are historically invisible in our world a little bit more visible in the community to the church. So the way that these art walks help that end is by giving people with disabilities a chance to be creative in a way that they don't normally get. They go out, take pictures, capture things in the world from their perspective, and then they share them with the community. We have art galleries, and the community comes and sees not only the artwork itself, but the artists, the people with disabilities, in a non-threatening, non-confrontational way. They're able to interact and engage with people that otherwise would have been probably ignored and unseen.
In what's kind of like the moment, the payoff moment, the first time you hosted the pop-up gallery where you were like, oh, junk, I should really figure out a way to help people do this. It's easy, it's simple, and it's profound. And look, you might, if you're human, you're going to roll a tear when this happens.
I think the moment where I realized, wow, this really worked, was during the gallery when some of the artists, the people with disabilities, were just so happy and proud that they made something that other people wanted to see. And they just felt, they're like, this is great. Like, we've never done anything like this before. I can't wait to do something like this again. And just to see the excitement that they had to be seen and to be able to share their work with other people, that was, for me, that was the...
Yeah, and I know a lot of people, especially leaders in church, want to do something that's like obviously a real goal, and then you're trying to figure out what to do, and you get overwhelmed and think you might fail. So one of the things Nathan did, and if you just go to Homebrewed, you can read the post about it, get all the resources. So he's already made a webinar that explains the process of hosting and putting it all together. He's made a whole bunch of resources. Basically, like 98% of the work he can do, he's done, and we'll talk to you through the process as you host these art walks. And there's tons of info about it. So I just hope any of you that have been thinking, how can my congregation and community support and connect with families that have members with disabilities, and let them lead us in reflecting about our faith, that you connect with Nathan, and he'll provide lots of energy and support for that process. And the other thing is, if you are someone who has a passion, right? Like Nathan's whole thing came out of his relationship with his brother, being his primary caregiver, and seeing what it's like to be ignored by the medical community, by the religious community. And he came to the hatchery, the school where I teach, and wanting to build a community where those people and their experiences are at the fore, and that was his passion. So if you have one of those type of passions and are interested in figuring out what that looks like, in building a community around it, you can holler at me or Nathan, and we'll tell you about it. Because I think there's a lot of people with lots of passion and gifts, and they just need the opportunity and support to bring new things into being. Yeah, and
I feel like this time of this year, with everything going on, there are more and more people, I think, who feel the urge to act and do things like this. So,
yeah. So there you go. Here you go. This is time. It's time for you to get your Volf on.
Too bad your name's not Peter, because then we could say this is
Peter and the Volf. Oh, well, there you go.
Hello to all the deacons, the elders, the bishops, the monsignors of the Homebrewed Christianity Empire. This is Tony Jones calling into the speak pipe. Hey, all you theology nerds. I know a lot of you are into youth ministry. We run the most epic youth ministry conference of the year. It's called Progressive Youth Ministry. This year it's taking place at the Montreat Conference Center in the beautiful state of North Cackalack, home state of one Trip Fuller. So join us there. Join me and Trip and a lot of other people for some really excellent time of speaking, music, beer and wine, theology nerd throwdowns. It's just going to be the best. We have a lot of people coming. You're going to love it. And with the code HBC as your promotional discount code, you're going to get $50 off, and that's going to bring the price down to under $200. Plus, you're going to be staying at Montreat, so food and lodging is going to be way cheaper than your average conference. So join us. Homebrewers, just log on to progressiveyouthministry.org. And when you get to the registration page, type in HBC, and you'll just see the price plummet. progressiveyouthministry.org. Take care. Out.
Well, hello, Homebrewed Christianity listeners. Today on the podcast is Miroslav Volf, and every good theology nerd knows who Miroslav Volf is. It's an exciting time to really get to talk to you, because in the middle of your career, after writing the epic, super nerdy books, the turn towards public theology and discussing religion in light of religious conflict and globalization continues to get more and more dire. So maybe we could begin by just hearing, how would you describe the situation today for the church in the globe and politically?
Wow, that's a very, very big question, and I'm not sure that I am fully prepared to do anything like justice to it. But I think that we live in challenging times. I've just finished a piece which is titled short essay. What will save the world? Question mark. Flourishing in the world we cannot save. And I think that's one of the challenges of the public side of the life of the church, is how to contribute to the flourishing of all people in a world that we better not try to save, because if we try to save the world, we're going to end up, we are more likely to hurl it into damnation than actually to achieve anything like salvation.
Mm-hmm. Well, in your kind of, I don't know if you would call them a trilogy, but in public faith, flourishing, and then public faith in action, there are a number of historical but also autobiographical events that frame the books by giving a talk on reconciliation, on 9/11, or going to the economic forum post collapse, and the question of desire not being framed. And I wonder if there's an experience or insight that really frames our current predicament and all the questions and anxiety that are being raised culturally across the globe, via Brexit, the election of Trump, that you see as a way of kind of centering thoughtful, critical, and faithful reflection.
Well, I'll give you some, at least one experience that was significant to me. I was this past July in Munich. There was a large gathering of ecumenical gathering of Christians under the banner United for Europe. And as I was in Europe, and there was just a post-Brexit, I believe, situation, as I was there and kind of trying to soak in the mentality of people surrounding me. Similar things were happening in the United States. It just seemed to me that we are in a kind of situation in which my own home country, where I was born, Croatia, was before and during the outbreak of the war in the 90s. We were close to one another, close to each other. Reasons. There was practiced what Mayor Douglas has called selective deafness, cultural selective deafness, where we weren't able somehow to cross the boundaries, and where nobody actually, more than that, where people were very hesitant to not to consider those who differ as enemies, because if you took their enemy, you would take away their reasons for existence. And to me, that's one of the scariest situations, especially for Christians to find themselves in, because I believe that love of enemy is as fundamental to Christianity as any other almost ethical precept. Or as, I would say, as characteristic, maybe not as important, but as characteristic of Christianity as any other of the ethical precepts.
Well, I know that when I got to talk with you at the Emergent Village Theological Conversation a while ago, you pointed out that when you wrote Exclusion and Embrace, the people who you wrote it for, the people that nourished your faith, they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear a theological reflection on how to address the hatred of the other, and it found an audience in the United States. So I find it really disheartening to think that question now, or that experience there is, rising up here in the United States, where the categories for us reflecting, especially as more progressive Christians, about our non-ideologically aligned members, is one where there is not just disagreement but it's like resistance substituting for our anger and hatred we don't want to acknowledge. So what kind of advice would you give for leaders and your students who have this intense outrage on behalf of justice, but are also finding that challenge to even seek reconciliation or understanding with other members of the body of Christ?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that I myself, obviously, in many ways, am facing, that we all are facing. And the challenge, I think, is simply to try to kind of insert ourselves into the debate or the shouting match on terms which are set by that shouting match. That sometimes, to use the image, looks more like a public brawl than like a reasonable public discourse. And my sense is then that we need to step back, reflect about our own fundamental commitments, and kind of double down on being the followers of the crucified Messiah. I think that's we lose when we try to outshout each other. We don't gain the argument, but we lose our souls. So I think our fundamental commitments must be to something that's more important than politics, and that commitment is to Jesus Christ as the Lord, to Jesus Christ in his capacity, in his life as the one serving the Lamb of God, giving one life for salvation of the world.
In Flourishing, you talk about both a religious and a secular form of nihilism, and this kind of hermeneutics of the gift that religion provides to the world in the public square. I wonder if you could describe the nature of that twofold nihilism that you describe, and how coming to see the world as more than just in its facticity, but in its giftedness, is the gift of religion that I think a lot of religious communities in times of anxiety they don't even recognize and give themselves to.
Yeah, I think that's right. So what I start there is by looking at a particularly Nietzschean form of critique of religion, and one of these critiques is kind of nihilistic character of religion. Religion, which is so obsessed about the kind of structure of meaning and commitment to transcendence that it forgets about the kind of ordinary world. On the other hand, you have a kind of a plunging of, especially in Western culture, plunging of people into consumerism or into wide variety of any other kinds of pleasures, and those pleasures seem to be emptied out of meaning. So you've got, on the one hand, a nihilism of very kind of sturdy, straight-jacketed meaning imposes a straight-jacket on reality. On the other hand, you've got this really pleasure-light nihilism that after each pleasure, the aftertaste is worse than after previous one. And I think that in many ways our world is in a kind of a pendulum going from one to the next. Empty pleasure leading to search for structures of meaning, rigid structures of meaning pull people into search for pleasures. And I think that, looking at, and particularly from the perspective of the Christian faith and the creation, God's creation, which is understood as a gift to us, we can discover how ordinary life, ordinary pleasures of ordinary life can acquire deeper, more satisfying, even pleasurableness if they're inserted in the larger framework of meaning that is provided by the sense that this thing that we have is more than itself. It's a gift to us. They speak of glory of God, and they speak also, therefore, and foster a relationship that I might have also with a God as the giver of creation. I'm hoping that would push also against the kind of insatiability that our the lack of ability of the things in ordinary life have to satisfy our pleasure, they feed into our insatiability and kind of addictions. If that cycle can be broken, it would be a great contribution both to solidarity between people and also for our care for natural environment, because we would find deeper satisfactions than just amassing the wealth that's being created, often at the expense of the vulnerable ones, whether they're in nature, environment, or the poor people.
So when you think about your own reflection around the Christian story, around the story of globalization and the challenges it raises, how would you frame that, especially for people that are trying to communicate it and invite fidelity out of congregants who, haven't had the luxury of hanging out with you and Tony Blair in a seminar or something like that?
Well, I think one of the central takeaways from studying the questions of faith and globalization, obviously the large structural questions that globalization poses on us are fundamental. Part of the kind of nationalist rebellion against globalization is because globalization has proven to be very much kind of unfair process. It has created these incredible gaps in wealth, not just wealth, but also power. Mm-hmm. Among people, people feel disempowered, and I think they're searching alternative ways in which they can address those issues. I think we kind of need to step back and ask the question of where our fundamental commitments are. And to me, it was, as I studied it, a realization that at the heart of us being authentically human lies the conviction that we do not live by bread alone. Mm-hmm. And living by bread alone, we actually contribute to our own dissatisfaction. What seems to be the goal of our existence, to find pleasures in the ordinary, ends up being internally subverted. That is an old and well-known theme in Christian faith, other religions as well. I think Buddhism, for instance, in a kind of radical way. But what do we do with our desires? How do we not just tame desire? How do we redirect our desires? How do we enrich our desires so that, in fact, we can find deeper satisfactions?
When you mentioned the passage about man not living by bread alone, and I wonder if there is some connection between that and the other two temptations of Jesus in the wilderness, kind of post-baptism before his ministry, for the church. Right, like if one of the temptations in the church in a secular age is to also reject transcendence and try to find its meaning and purpose in materiality alone, or maybe to jump off the temple and slide down and get all supernatural and demonstrate authority that way, or to be the slightly more benevolent Caesar and bow the knee, like. How would you draw those connections between those temptations of other ways of Jesus being the Messiah and other temptations the church has in being the body of Christ?
Yeah, I think these temptations are very much present. I think there is a temptation of Christianity to become a kind of prosperity of religion. Mm-hmm. It's an instrument of creating more and better and more sophisticated bread. That's what it ends up being, and it's good to the extent that it delivers on that, and it's bad to the extent that it does not. We know the versions of this type of Christianity, but I think in general, whether progressive, or more conservative, charismatic, there is this deep-seated temptation to think of the utility, quote unquote, of Christian faith in terms of what kinds of worldly goods it delivers. Now, that's obviously tied with the other great temptation, I think, which is a kind of political. First one is economic temptation. The other one is political temptation for a church to become something like not just politically engaged religion, but political religion in a sense, to tie itself closely with agents of power, governmental power, to see themselves as expressing the unity of the entire nation, and then the expectation was we're going to have some kind of a Christian influence. Tendency, I think, or the consequence often has been that Christian faith, other religions as well, was simply implicated in the struggles of power that are part and parcel of the political life, whether internally or externally. I think we ought to resist these two temptations: temptation of power, temptation of economic success. And there's this other kind of fame temptation, right? Some kind of spectacular thing to do so that then generally attention can be drawn to oneself and what one stands for. And that generally turns out, again, to have some kind of economic impact.
What do you think was being revealed about the relationship of Christian identity and American identity when Trump got levels of support from evangelicals that even previous Republicans haven't? Because I know there are like 17,000, 18,000 people that listen to the podcast every week, and most of them are ministers and congregations where even if the tradition, or they could be Episcopal or UCC or whatever, you're in a congregation where there are plenty of people whose religious identity wasn't being brought in to that conflict around presidential politics, and they were either oblivious to it, or the minister feels guilty because they didn't say the right things to raise these type of issues. But then there's I think a temptation in all the anxiety that comes up in leaders to then overreact and not frame what's in front of them now and the challenges there in the bigger picture. And so how would you describe kind of discernment for leaders in the church about the appropriate way of using voice, influence, power, and call in a time where you start questioning whether or not we've done a decent job at all?
Yeah, no, I think I was quite troubled by the levels of support for Trump among evangelical Christians. I understand that some of the concerns that they have, in particular something like abortion issues, but I'm also worried that that seems to occlude any other relevant issue to the Christian faith, and there are many relevant issues that have not been brought to bear on assessments to what extent Trump is or is not an adequate, from Christian standpoint, adequate candidate. So I think my sense would be it's important for us to school our judgment, to be sensitive to multiplicity of issues that are in play, to place our priorities in proper order, and simply to make sure that we have listened and that we understand the concerns of others. Now, I myself, I think I believe, my politics in this, and certainly in this election, have been staunchly anti-Trump. I may not have listened as carefully as I ought to have to those who think differently, even though I have close friends, family members who have done so. Great admiration for their character. And my question then is to myself is to understand what made them go that direction, pick up on those concerns and bring it into the healthy conversation among Christians. I think now is the opportunity for conservative and progressive Christians to sit together around issues and ask, what is it that we can agree on, and where do we disagree? Why is it that we disagree? Can we articulate reasons why we disagree, and not just by our gut reactions, but can we articulate them by appeal to the sources of revelation? Is it true that Jesus Christ is the measure of politics, as I claim, for instance? Mm-hmm. Now, that might be an interesting conversation to have, and what implication it has, and we might draw different conclusions from it. But if we have that discussion, it's going to be a substantive theological discussion. This emptying of our political discourse among Christians from substantive Christian commitments is what troubles me the most in some ways. It's kind of, Jesus is absent.
Yeah.
Deeply Christian commitments are not present, and that's the troubling thing.
You said in your book that theology is a gift to public discourse because it thinks about humanities and our desire, the predicament of the human heart, by thematizing us and our existence with a reference to the transcendence. And I wonder if one of the problems, especially more mainline Protestant Christians have had, is that the fact that culturally God is not necessary, you can imagine a life without speaking God, has led to many Christians just turning to ethics or sociology, and as opposed to continuing to proclaim the gospel, where our own reality, our shared life together, and our life in creation before God continues to be thematized by the Son of Man, let alone just God.
Yeah. No, I think if I understood you correctly, I would very much agree with that. I think just like a broader culture, we tend to disregard the great questions, fundamental questions of life, and we almost seem to assume that we know what our lives should be about, how they should be lived, and it's only a matter to find out the means to achieve those ends. So I think very much Christians participate in the same thing. They may disagree among each other about the means to achieve certain ends, or maybe in some ways some moral issues that seem significant. There may be disagreement on those, but kind of a sense that you need to step back and ask the question, who is a human being? Who am I supposed to be as a human being standing before God in a broad array of my responsibilities, and to live in the sight of God the humanity that has been revealed to us in Jesus Christ, of which the scriptures throughout speak. That seems to me that passion for that, I don't see it very much around. And that's the kind of impoverishes our political concerns, because they end up being kind of party politics. And I think the two parties are debunked in many ways. Mm-hmm. I think we need alternatives that go beyond, and those alternatives can be properly articulated if they draw on resources of something much deeper than politics, much deeper than cultural sensibilities. And that is, in my certainly case, the character, person, and life of Jesus Christ, who I believe is the truth, the way, and the life.
Even the way you describe that affirmation, to me, seems that there's a theological discussion that draws connections between what are bifurcated, I guess, political topics, like how do we deal with Islam or immigration or identity politics.
I think they form. There are unified theological perspectives that can be brought to bear on these issues, and the worst thing we can do is that to address them with the resources of talk show, radio talk shows, or whatever else might be, or internet for that matter, around in our gut feelings and fears, rather than see our lives rooted in a reality that was there yesterday, is here today, and will be there forever, and that stands at the foundation of who we are and who our world is, and therefore who we as society should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. And maybe you could just let everyone know where they can connect with you and all the resources and work you're doing at Yale to kind of further this conversation around faith in the public square.
Yeah, I think on our website at Yale, you can find us, yale.edu/faith. And then I am on Twitter and Facebook occasionally, and you can follow us.
You're very entertaining on Twitter. I'm just saying, it's rare that a theologian gets into back and forths on Twitter, and I just gotta say I'm a fan of your tweeting.
It's a bit of a public ministry. I hope to kind of elevate discussion on Twitter about some of these issues and bring in what otherwise ends up being a very contentious medium, a bit more deliberation, hopefully a bit more grace that would stimulate us thinking in the right ways. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. All the best to you.
All right. Bye. Well done, dear listener. Made it through a very special episode. And now we're going to tell you like some ways we can connect. And obviously, the easiest way is just go to homebrewedchristianity.com. You can find out all sorts of things there, like where events are, where classes are happening, and that kind of stuff. If you want to be like super, super amazeballs, you can be a member of the Homebrewed community. Go to homebrewedcommunity.com. Then you'll find out everything all the time. Be in our secret Facebook group. Always be a part of all the classes. And I get to have input and shape special Theology Nerd episodes. But here's the thing. If you aren't a member and want to join the class for the questions for the believing skeptic, you can do that. Because over February, the class is going on with Barry Taylor and I. After that, you'll probably be able to get the videos, purchase those junks on the website. And yeah. So what else is happening?
I think you're going to Cincinnati, aren't you?
Yes, I'm going to Cincinnati. And it's in February.
February 10th and 11th.
On the 10th, I'm going to be hanging out with Adam Clark. And we're going to be doing some theologizing right there in Cincinnati together. Adam is a theologian who is writing the Homebrewed Guide to Salvation. He was out here for beer camp. And now we're gonna get to hang out in Cincinnati, which is like your home state.
Home state, other end, but it counts.
Well, the other end of Ohio is closer than the other end of California.
This is true. That is very true.
That's an important fact, dear listeners.
California is a lot longer than you think it is.
It is. Have I ever told you?
Yes, you have.
Okay. So, love you, Gregory. And we said, it's only 2 hours into the other state. And we drove. That was also the day I realized I did not have any cruise control when you begin a 17-and-a-half-hour drive.
I've been there.
It's no fun. But you know what really is fun? Progressive Youth Ministry this year in North Carolina. It's going to be at Montreat, which I'm pretty excited about. One, because it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. The other is because that means everybody's not at like different hotels, so there's no reason not to hang out till late to the evening. Mm-hmm. We're going to do a live podcast. Aaron Simmons is going to be on the podcast, who, if you remember the End of Religion episodes of the podcast, he was a part of that. And I'm doing a pregame on the 7th of March. The event's the 8th, the 10th. And it's a Theology Nerd Boot Camp. Ashes, Angst, and Ancestors. That's right. I'm going to be talking about the 3 biggest burdens adolescence throws on us. Knowing you're going to die, the struggle for identity, and all the unseen ways your parents screw you up. We're going to talk about those 3 things and what it's like to think about them theologically, to help students do so, how to lead and process in that situation, and maybe in the same time. See, this is the trick of high quality teaching, is they think they're learning about adolescence, but it's really a time for us as a community for self-discovery.
Kumbaya.
Yeah. It's more subtle, as opposed to a direct way for self-discovery. This August in Germany.
You are like the king of segues.
Oh, this August we are doing a spiritual pilgrimage on the 500th anniversary of the Reformation in Germany, in the footsteps of Luther. That was. You like that?
I like that. It was very dramatic.
This August, we shall travel the footsteps of Luther, reflecting on faith. Questions that provoke anxiety. Drink delicious German beer and look towards the future. The next 500 years. That was my German hum.
That was pretty good.
I mean, it wasn't a German accent.
No, not at all.
But
it was good.
Yeah. So
I'm convinced.
If you want to, go to Germany, travel, know Luther, experience it, think about it, and really, not end the month of August thinking you failed as a human.
Why do you like Luther so much, Drew?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Why? Because Luther was someone who realized that a lot of what happens religiously becomes oppressive if the foundational blocks aren't made clear. And Luther was a theologian who, in his time, through his critique and pushback to parts of the Catholic Church, brought to the fore that at the heart of faith is God's full affirmation of our complete being and self. And that the most true thing about you is that you're God's beloved. And that faith is trusting that God's word about you is true and not what you say, what you think, what your parents have said about you, and all that kind of stuff. It's the heart of the gospel. Luther discovered it. It shaped things. There are also plenty of things you can learn from Luther not to do. Like anti-Semitism. I'm against it.
Suffocating children.
That's something you shouldn't do. Or blaming Satan because you have serious bowel issues from eating just meat, cheese, and large amounts of beer.
Which we will be doing in the spiritual pilgrimage.
Yeah, but it's not like you have to do it all the time.
Not all the time.
Yeah. So there you go. If you want to know more about it,
you make me want to love Luther even more now.
That's what I like to hear. If you want to know more about it, you can go to the website, homebrewedchristianity.com. You can text the word Luther to 44222. 44222.
That's 44222.
I know. It gets really confusing. Just like all the
So many
fours and twos,
yeah. Yep.
how many of which one, it gets overwhelming, so then you should just go to the website. And so any questions about any of this, let me know. If you're going to be in Cincinnati and want to hang out, then holla holla. Twitter's the best way to find me. But until then, keep it fresh.